who I have not met. Oh, excellent. All right. So welcome to Apps with the AI Alliance Special IT Academy Edition. For those of you who may not be aware, the AI Alliance is a group of HBS IT staff who've been tasked with exploring all things AI to build excitement at HBS. My name is Kara Amana. Very nice to meet all of you who I have not yet met. I am one of the co-leads of the Alliance, and you'll meet Lawrence and Ryan, my two esteemed co-leads, a bit later on in our conversation. So we are going to dive in and get started. A quick look at our agenda for this afternoon. We're going to start with a few presentations from colleagues about the cool ways they are using AI in their work at the business school. Then next, we're going to get some high-level feature updates on AI tools that are available here at Harvard. And then it's
Hayden,
our
I'm just
hope.
gonna skip out of the breakout because I I
Whoop,
I just got back to my desk.
okay. Up. Thank you. Okay. A little mute situation there. And lastly, this is your ahead advance notice that we're going to have a group discussion towards the end of the session. And we would love to have you participate in that. And so you can be prepared ahead for that. Okay. A quick look at some resources. Um, Gonna highlight a few resources, and I would encourage you, this area of AI is evolving, I think, as we all know, so quickly. And so please do continue to access resources and review them regularly because lots of things are changing. So that I will, and I should add before I dive into this, that these slides will be made available, and Justin will help us in getting them sent out to all of you. So you will have access to these links. So no need to worry about having those links on hand right now. The top two resources are only available to folks who have an HBS login, excuse me. So sorry for that, but I do think worth mentioning that the first is a SharePoint site that we have developed internally at HBS IT, designed as a central mechanism to share information out to our community, along with, most importantly, links to some wonderful training that our Learning Design and Training Services team has available around AI. And we've also highlighted here some of the wonderful work of our colleagues at Baker Library. That first link will take you to a sign up for their generative AI newsletter, which is a great summary look at what's happening in the news around AI. And last, they have a great e-learning activity that they developed primarily for our MBA students. But I thought in early days, it was a great way to understand like how an LLM works, and to a good intro if that's something you're looking for. And I'm sure folks, and I hope folks are familiar with the Harvard University resources. The first being the Generative AI at Harvard site. And then if you're interested in learning more, getting more engaged, details on the Harvard AI Community of Practice. Okay. And so this presentation is given by our colleague Mike Downing, who works in the HBS Live online classroom. Unfortunately, Mike couldn't be with us this afternoon. And so he has recorded his session. But before we dive in, I thought it was helpful for general context for folks who might not be aware. The HBS Live Online Classroom is a state-of-the-art interactive online classroom that brings our famed CASE method to life in the digital environment. And participants connect to a 96-seat video wall, which you can see in this picture, from anywhere in the world, and engage with faculty members and peers just like they would in a physical HBS classroom. And one faculty member noted, it's just about as close to the classroom as you can possibly get without physically being in the classroom. So if you'll pardon my switch here. We found this to be the most effective way to make this happen. I am going to share this video. And
Audio's not coming through, Cara. At least not for me.
not encouraging. Sorry about that, folks. Lawrence, you want to try on your side?
Yeah, let me give that a whirl.
Sorry about that. All of my testing.
No, that's okay. I think
I-
in Zoom there's an extra like share with sound. Let me see if I can get that going.
Yeah.
I imagine you guys must know, do the students that participate from remote locations, can they see something similar to Zoom where they can scroll through and see the other participants, or is it not, or is that not part of the functionality?
Oh, that's a good question, Ken.
In
I
in the
don't know if
LLC classroom,
in the yeah, Ryan, do you know the answer about the LOC classroom?
they cannot.
They cannot, okay.
Right, it's a very managed production view where they're sent, whether it's the screen content or specific camera views at any given time.
That's still
Okay,
great.
Yeah. Lawrence, you want to try on your side?
Yeah.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Mike Downing. I'm a program and delivery manager with the Live Online Classroom
Is that
team.
coming through?
I'm currently
Yes.
here in the Live Online
So
Classroom.
if you want to go to full
and today I'm going to
screen.
give you a demonstration on how to use AI Sandbox to analyze data. So first up, that's an image of the Live Online Classroom located in the basement of Cumnock Hall. So anytime faculty come into the Live Online Classroom for a session, myself and other team members track the feedback they're given. They might make comments after the session or during the session to the participants. Some of the things that we'll hear faculty say is they really enjoy the breakout room feature. When participants are sent to the breakout rooms in the Live Online Classroom, they're able to see them within those rooms. They really enjoy that. This spreadsheet is comprised of just made-up names, made-up pieces of feedback. Some of it is pretty accurate. Some of it's been completely altered, but it's just to give you an idea of how to use AI Sandbox. AI Sandbox allows files to be uploaded, but it doesn't allow you to upload XLSX files, so you will have to convert them to a CSV file. And there are file size limitations, so you may need to scale back on the amount of data that is in your spreadsheet. So for the first time I ran this through, used AI Sandbox. I used the GPT-4 model. I uploaded the file, and I told it what each column represented: the date, the faculty name, the program name, the feedback type, the type of comment, a summary of the feedback, and asked it to summarize the document. And basically it gave me what I already knew. It's a summary of the faculty feedback, mentions positives, suggestions, and some complaints. So it's basically an overview of the document, which I had already known. Really not all that useful unless you aren't familiar with the document. But then I asked it to give me a summary of the positive comments, the negative comments, and some of the suggestions. And the results were pretty useful. It was a really easy way to help categorize the comments. You can see here it's just mentioning that faculty are impressed with the space in the Live Online Classroom, the chat ticker. Some of the negative comments, really, these are all made up, but it's about the temperature, sometimes about the coffee selection there. And then also it mentions some suggestions about having a document to help if participants are sharing a screen. So things along those lines. But it's all broken down now into positive comments, negatives, and suggestions. But if you only have a limited amount of time to meet, I asked it to give me what it felt were the 5 most interesting pieces of feedback from the list. For ChatGPT-4, it mentioned that Brad Shumway was impressed with the chalk in the Live Online Classroom. That is actually an accurate piece of feedback that we often get from faculty. Another faculty member, Stanley Wallace, mentions he really likes the breakout room features. Another mentioned that she was not happy with the coffee selection. Another faculty member suggested incorporating VR into the Live Online Classroom. And another had a complaint that the Live Online Classroom wasn't hot enough. This particular faculty prefers it to be 90 degrees. So it's interesting to see how GPT-4, what it felt were the 5 most interesting pieces of feedback. But when I ran that into the Claude V2.1 model, I gave it the same prompts. And I asked it to give me what it felt were the 5 most interesting pieces of feedback. And it's interesting to see how the results differ compared to GPT-4. What it felt was the first most interesting piece of feedback was that the room should be kept to 60 degrees by one faculty member. Another mentioned that the writing on the boards was too small. Jason Simpson, a faculty member, suggested displaying the chat messages over the participants' faces. So a lot of these pieces of feedback are really not what myself and other team members would feel to be all that important. So when you compare them side by side, you'll see just how they differ. And I think it's important to keep in mind when utilizing AI Sandbox, it's important to note that it should be used as a tool and really not a solution. So one thing you could do is you could run the data through the various models, ask each model to give you the 5 most interesting pieces of feedback, and then determine for yourself what the 5 most interesting pieces of feedback are. I personally don't think faculty commenting on it should be 60 degrees or 90 degrees, or the coffee selections are really all that applicable to what we're doing here in the live online classroom, comparing that to faculty that are commenting on the breakout room feature or the polling feature, or just being able to connect with participants from all over the world. So that's a way to utilize AI Sandbox to help analyze data. Hope you find this useful. Hope to see you all in the live online classroom at some point. Thanks, everybody.
Hey. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Lawrence.
You're welcome. I just stopped sharing for you, Cara.
Oh, now I'm clicking, of course, the share sound that I should have clicked off ages ago, but here we are. Okay, I am going to turn things over to my colleague, Caitlin.
Awesome. Thank you, Kara. So I'm going to talk to creating a resource management GPT, which is something that we built here in HBS IT. I'm going to talk a little bit about the background, and then I'll pass it over to Ryan, and he'll talk to how we actually built it and then some outcomes there. So I'm actually going to skip down to the bottom and go over just a few definitions that are a little bit HBS IT centric. So starting with ServiceNow and Resource Guru, in this context, we're going to talk to how they're used for plan time, actual time, and time reporting. There's a lot of other functionality that those tools have, but just for the sake of this, we're going to talk about how it basically becomes a repository for data and time for us that we can pull from. The next thing I just want to touch on is the hackathon. So the hackathon is where HBS IT staff can come together in small groups. It's a 3-day event. You're working with people that you're not typically working with on a day-to-day basis, building connections, innovating, collaboratively working with them, all with a goal to either build prototypes, explore new tools, tackle process improvements, explore enhancements to existing tools. It's a spot where we can all get together, really put our brains together and solve for a problem. So with those few definitions in mind, I'm going to talk to how we actually built this chatbot that's trained on ServiceNow and Resource Guru data that can answer questions about planned and actual time of staff. We built this with the goal to help forecast future plan time based on historical planned and actual data. And then there's some functionality examples under there too, where managers can ask about their functional team, individuals can ask about insights and provide estimates to their project managers, or PMs can use it to help with project planning. There's a lot more functionality in there too, but these are some quick examples. And then that last bullet right there. So the specific fields in ServiceNow data, are helping the chatbot to identify resource planning patterns based on the project information. So all of the data in there is all helping to inform our bot. And then we'll move on to the next slide. Awesome. And this is, why did we build it? What problems were we solving for? So a couple things we identified was functional managers, project managers, they may have a difficult time estimating how much time is going to be needed for either project work, operational work, and then they might not know which resources are needed for the type of work that they're trying to undertake. So the resource management GPT will be a spot where the FMs and PMs can use it as a self-service forum to access that information without running from system to system to try to access all the info. And lastly, it's going to allow the use of historical data to inform plan time in Resource Guru, which is going to make the Guru data more accurate, more trusted, which in turn is going to help your bots maintain accurate and trusted information within it. And then I will pass it right over to Ryan, and he's going to show you how we actually went in and built this thing.
Thank you, Caitlin. So the little demo that we're going to run through right here, for some of you, you may be familiar with it. Others, this will be pretty new, but it's basically how to build your own GPT in 2 minutes. And this gets you through the basics, and we'll talk you through what kind of some of the next steps are. And this is the next evolution from working with the sandbox, where it's kind of you go in and you use prompting, can upload files, you can do sort of those things as you need to. And then this is where you can really do a lot of the more detailed things that Caitlin was just describing, where you're sharing it with other people. It's a more repeatable effort. So when you're in ChatGPT, you go up to create a GPT, and it opens up a chat window like you're used to, and you can just sort of describe what it is you're trying to do. The ChatGPT, as most of you know, has a pretty wide range of information that it's training from. And so this kind of helps it narrow down the part of the world that you're trying to use. So we're saying it's going to be a resource management application, and what we're using it for, it proposes a name, it proposes a logo, which I just, for these purposes, just say, yeah, those look great. And so it creates the basic structure of what it is we're going to be working with. It then asks, what are we going to do now? And so I say, I'm going to upload a file with the key attributes. And that's what Caitlin had described of our past resource information, as well as our forward-looking capacities. So we upload a spreadsheet with that information, and then you can still work on some more of your configuration. So you can say what specific questions you want to queue up. In this case, we just enter a couple of key things that we think project managers might want to know. What projects are currently open, who's available to work on a project in the next quarter. And these are things that when we were working in the hackathon environment, we thought would be really good things to work with when we're training GPT. So just trying to think forward a little bit. We add some of those things in. Click update. You can share it to other people if you want to at that point. But from there, you have a functioning GPT. So 2 minutes, very quick. You have it working. Is it ready for the entire world to use? Probably not. But depending on how simple or how complex of a GPT it is, that's how you would run through it. Kara, can you go to the next slide, please?
Today is not my day with PowerPoint. Sorry, folks.
In your defense, I saw you click the advance button. We all saw it. You just
Right?
didn't do
Like,
it.
come on. Sorry, folks.
So as Kara's setting that up,
Sorry.
one of the things that, that's the crash course on how to create one. It really does only take a couple of minutes to create your basic GPT. But once you are done with that, there's a lot of other things that need to happen to make it really functional. And this is some of the lessons learned that we had, and what are some of the things that we wanted to do going forward. The big thing is that, especially when you're working with a file that you're uploading or multiple files, you do want clean data as much as possible. But even then, you're still going to be training it on what that file is. So if you have multiple tabs in your Excel spreadsheet, if you have several different columns that may look similar, you're still going to have to tell the program what those things are. So you can say, hey, what is the column that looks like its resource name? And you can make sure it understands what that is, and then maybe describe what it is. If it's a role versus a position, or if those are two different things you have in your spreadsheet, you want to say what those are and how those might affect responses that people are going to be asking for. So if they say, I need somebody with a specific role versus I need a specific person, those might generate different results and give you a different list of people. The other really important thing was that the editing of GPTs is a solo effort. So we were doing this as a group, and as I found out, I could share this with other people to view the configuration and work with it and chat with it. But I was the only one that could do the editing and training of the tool, upload new files, doing that sort of thing. So you can own it, they can make copies of it, and they can take it forward from a point in time, but that is just something you want to keep in mind if you are going to do a departmental GPT. You do really have to have like an owner for it. And the last thing that we learned is just how important training is. We were on a shortened time frame that Caitlin described where we didn't have a ton of time to work with it, but in the little bit that we did, when we narrowed our focus to training for a specific question, it actually got some pretty good results. But if we're to roll this out for everyone, it was going to take a lot more effort to get all that training in for all the different scenarios that they could be asking for, all the time frames, all the positions, all the departments. There's quite a bit of information you have to really work with the bot for to get that information in. So looking forward, we definitely want to keep enhancing the amount of data that's in there. So both the breadth and depth of it. So as much as we can, add more information, more attributes for longer time periods to make it smarter, as well as finding ways to keep it current. That was another big challenge that we're going to have is you were going to have to upload new information whenever you wanted it, either weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever that might be. And the other thing was, when we talk about what that fourth bullet is, add information, how to access the information in Resource Guru and ServiceNow. That goes into the data cleanliness idea. So you can only do so much with past data, but if you really want to save yourself going forward, you want things to be a little bit more repeatable. You want to kind of train your community on, entering clean data from the beginning so that if you are going to get this repeatable process where you're uploading new files, it puts you in a much better spot. And then what we're going to go to next is what we would love to see to avoid creating new files all the time and uploading them is turning over Fritz, where he's going to talk about the API.
Great segue. Thank you so much for that, Ryan. So hi, everybody. My name is Fritz. Working here as an application analyst in HBS IT, but here and very excited to talk to you a little bit about once you're ready, once you've kind of played around with an LLM before and you're ready to start going to that next level, I'm going to be talking a little bit today about the ChatGPT API platform. So I call this a tale of two platforms, which we'll go into a lot more on this next slide. But I'm really going to start by disaggregating that these are indeed two completely different services for accessing ChatGPT, and that they will, in many cases, use one credential to access two different platforms, and that your data and the data that is all covered when you're using chatgpt.com under the enterprise agreement that Harvard has with OpenAI is not protected when you go to platform.openai.com, and that we should really be looking at that as mostly an exploratory platform to deal with things that are level 1 data only. And once you are ready to go and start using Harvard data, it's a really good time to go to the Harvard API Gateway, which can allow you to give Harvard a billing ID, you get an API key in return, and Hewitt has done a really good job. Shouts out to the team there that manages the API gateway to make sure that all of that access is protected and that you can start using it on a scalable format for higher levels of data. So some of the information on this slide is HBS specific. I'm going to gloss over that for now, but I just really, if there's one thing I can do today, it's reinforce that there are some extra steps to make sure that data is protected when we talk about accessing the OpenAI API. So Kara, if we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Why do you want to use the ChatGPT API, right? I kind of alluded to that earlier. This is a good time to start using a programmatic approach to API access, right? So API is standing for Application Programming Interface. This is when you want to graduate beyond typing in your questions one at a time into a web interface. This is when you want to go beyond uploading documents manually to a custom GPT. This is a solution that will allow you to do a lot of that work programmatically and to start automating and scaling a lot of these processes, right? Like, let's say you have one query that you want to ask over tons of different data. The API is your partner in doing that. So what I have broken down here is kind of that pros and cons list, right? The API, or sorry, the prompt interface, I'm going to mix those up a lot today. I apologize. The prompt interface is great for this exploratory work, right? It's great for ad hoc queries. It's great for finding out, okay, I need to ask the same question to this data a lot. Maybe that's what leads you to Caitlin's use case where you have repeatable questions. You can just swap out the data, and a custom GPT is great for that. But when you really want to take that to larger sets of data, when you really want to start building a more advanced system that is able to have features added onto it, right? Like custom GPTs, for example, you cannot see the kinds of questions that are being asked to them. So if you have, let's say, a tutor bot, or let's say you do want to know questions that your team is asking to your custom GPT, there's really no pathway to do that on chatgpt.com. You would have to start building your own custom application that would allow you to save those queries in sort of a separate storage database. Not going to get too into the weeds on building custom apps today, but that's really when you want to start using the API. And then the other really important consideration here is that the license and the access you have on chatgpt.com does not extend to platform.openai.com. All the API tokens right now for OpenAI, whether you go through the Harvard API Gateway, whether you go directly to OpenAI, it is on a per use basis, right? So every query you ask uses a certain number of tokens, you pay for those tokens, and the application stops running when you run out of tokens. So that's really the big differences. And then we will talk much more about RAG as we get into this, but we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide for now. So what you can see here is kind of what the open or platform.
Sorry, what was that? RAG? RAG? What was that?
Yeah.
RAG?
Thank you, Ken. Really great question. That stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. That is a very vague term that a lot of AI companies are using right now. But essentially, it is the AI's ability to read your data, to kind of summarize and chunk it out, and then give you more relevant responses based off of the data you have uploaded, but without needing to read all those documents over again. So let's say you upload a 1,000-page document. It's going to sort of chunk that out into smaller pieces. And when you say, hey, tell me about how HBS supports Zoom in the hybrid classroom, it's going to pull words like hybrid and classroom and Zoom out of that larger document and give you an answer that is founded in your own data, rather than just the generic off the street black box that is the large language model that we see in ChatGPT. But that's a really good question. Thank you. Thank you. Retrieval Augmented Generation. So what you see here is the interface in the playground section of platform.openai.com. Hopefully, going right after Ryan, it looks a lot like the custom GPT interface that you saw earlier, right? It's going to ask you for a name. It's going to ask you to give it instructions. Now, again, it doesn't have the cool create feature where you can kind of have the GPT help you. But again, that's a perfect example where you have ChatGPT open in one tab, helping you write those instructions, and you're copying and pasting them into this instruction section. But this one is going to get even further into the nitty gritty. So as you can see here, the Assistance API, which is what we're looking at here, actually allows you to pick which model you want to use to reference. So maybe you have easier to answer questions. Maybe you're expecting much higher use for this bot. You might actually downgrade the model to a ChatGPT 4 or a ChatGPT 4 mini so that it's not costing you quite as much to have these questions run, or maybe you really need it to have that 4.0 level of response, knowing that those tokens are a bit more expensive. And then again, instead of uploading just, I think, 20 documents with a limit of 512 megabytes is the limit in a custom GPT. It's actually been a minute since I've had to think about that number, so don't quote me on that. But this Assistance API is actually built on the version 2 of the Assistance API. Custom GPTs, by and large, are based off of OpenAI's Assistance v1, which has much stricter limits on how much data you can upload. The Assistance v2 is in the neighborhood of 10,000 files, and many, many gigabytes of storage that you can have. So you can upload a larger data set, and then it's performing that retrieval augmented generation on that data for you. So it's turning all the files you upload in a folder into a vectorized data store. Again, that vectorization being the chunking, the parsing, and the better summarization, so that it's not only using your tokens more efficiently, but again, giving you answers founded primarily in the data that you're uploading, not just, oh, I think I know about what you're talking about from my training data. It's giving you answers based off of your data, which is really the crucial piece here. So then you can turn on code interpreter. We're kind of going to gloss over temperature and top P. Those are, again, some of that statistical data. Higher temperature means that the model will be more creative and it will go down that stat tree to say more elaborate things. Lower temperature means it will really strictly only use the, like, if you say the word Zoom and Zoom is in the document, it's going to make that connection like crazy. It's not going to know the other definitions of Zoom that are not the video conferencing platform that we all know and love. So we're going to go ahead and skip ahead one more slide, and we're going to kind of see a demo of what this looks like. So this is a bot that we created a quick hackathon at HBS IT. I basically took a few documents, some training documents for the hybrid classroom here at HBS, defining some of the roles of the people involved, defining what the hybrid classroom is and what it does. And as you can see here, I asked it a very simple question. What is the role of an OLF in the hybrid classroom? Well, if you're not in HBS or HBS IT, you might not know that OLF stands for Online Learning Facilitator. But because I gave this assistant all of that training data in the form of our public-facing documentations on the classroom, it immediately knows what an OLF is. It's not that ChatGPT model off the street that is kind of confused when I'm using these very specific acronyms. It can actually point towards that data. And if you see those small annotations, those number 1 and number 2, all the way out to number 24, those are the actual references in my data that the bot is pulling the answer from. So let's say that I disagree with an assertion that it's making, right? Let's say that I don't think OLF stands for Online Learning Facilitator. Well, I can hover over that number 1 and see which document the assistant pulled that piece of information from, and I can correct it. I can add to it. I can subtract from it. I can really start to use this retrieval augmented generation, which is what those cited sources really are at the end of the day, to start improving the results that I'm getting, to start refining it, not even really with fine tuning or all of these very high level AI concepts, but rather feeding it that clean, accurate data every single time. So that's just kind of an example of how it works and why getting into the assistance is so powerful so quickly. We'll go on to the next slide. What's new in ChatGPT land is a slide I always like to include. We have the new O1 model, ChatGPT O1 Preview and O1 Mini. This is the new model that is available in the Harvard ChatGPT workspace as well as the HBS ChatGPT workspace. And it is a much more powerful model in the sense that it is actually going to spend a little bit more time thinking about the responses it's giving. But what that actually looks like in practice is that when you ask the O1 model a question, it will actually provide you a brief summary at the top of every response that sort of walks you through the steps that it took, right? And that can be really helpful when you're writing a knowledge article or you're trying to explain a complicated concept, or if you're like me and you're trying to remember how to do calculus again. Like, it will actually walk you step by step, much more like an instructor would, on how to apply Stokes' theorem, rather than just giving you the answer and feeding it to you and sending you on your way. My PSA here is that it does have a much stricter rate limit than ChatGPT's other models available through the EDU license. Thanks, Hester. I'm glad I'm not the only one. But yeah, it's a 50 message per week limit. That is subject to change. They want to increase that, but it is like 50 per week is way stricter than anything we've seen before. So be a little bit more sparing when you're trying to learn calculus in the middle of a workday. And then the advanced voice mode, that feature that we saw in March, the much lauded ability to actually talk to the GPT is here. But I actually want to advise a little bit of caution. By default, anything that you say to the ChatGPT voice mode will be a memory. That is another feature of ChatGPT that is going to try to track the things that you talk to it about in a memories feature that you can turn off at will in the settings in your chatgpt.com portal. But it is interesting to see how it actually will take that voice mode and the conversations you have with it and start to define and refine conversations you have in the future. Sometimes I think that's great. Sometimes I absolutely hate that. Like sometimes I want, again, that off the street ChatGPT doesn't know anything about me. It's just going to provide me a general answer. And sometimes I do want it to go, oh, Fritz, you work in IT, so maybe you want something a little bit more nitty gritty with the technical details. But that's what's new in ChatGPT. And now we're going to spend the last little bit of my time talking about the dream. So this is my really scuffed version of imagining what a custom application built on the ChatGPT API platform looks like and the benefits that it gives you. So again, when you're using the API, you are going to need to design your own front end. You're going to need to design an interface. Maybe it's web-based, maybe it's not. That's going to allow you to input text that it ships off to ChatGPT and ships you an answer back. But that's where you're going to build in those really cool features, right? Like capturing those chats, like recalling older threads, all these really cool things that the wonderful people working on the Harvard AI Sandbox have done. And it's going to give you the ability to store that, the ability to recall that, the ability to see trends and what people are asking, right? That's kind of the custom front layer, the top of the pyramid that you're building. And I want to think of this assistance API as the middle layer of that app, kind of the engine in the center that keeps things running. So that's where you're feeding in instructions and refining them using your wonderful new prompt engineering skills. That's where you're giving it capabilities like the code interpreter, or maybe you don't want it to have that. That's where you're adjusting the sliders like temperature and frequency penalty to make it either very strict about providing answers or very specific about its wording or not. And then the base layer, the all important layer that I hope all of you have heard this at least once in some AI related presentation, it will only ever be as good as the data that you feed it. But the flexibility of using this programmatic interface, just as Ryan alluded to right at the end of his PowerPoint or his slides, is that when you want, like, let's say that you have a custom layer that you love, you've already built that UI interface into a web app. Let's say that you really like the instructions because they're really refined to talk to Resource Guru and to give you those PPMO level answers. But now you want it to look at different data. Now you want it to look at 2024, 2025, 2026, with the ability to just point to a different vector storage base in your app, or again, to go into platform.openai.com and swap out what data is in that vector store. You can just slide the bottom out of your app, and now it's looking at a whole set of data, and now it's all pretty much reusable, right? Like each one of the layers in this pyramid can be adjusted without affecting the others too substantially. And that's where I really think the flexibility comes in. So that's kind of the dream. Full credit to Nat Gingersfield from the HBS IT instructional design team for this wonderful metaphor of those bear puzzles where you swap the shirt and the pants and the hat. But that's really what we're kind of allegorying here. And with that, I think that's actually the end of my slides.
Great. Thank you, Fritz. So just before we jump into the conversation part of this presentation, I also want to quickly highlight the Sandbox 2.0. So if you haven't played with the Sandbox in a little while, I strongly encourage you to check it out. The team over there have spent a ton of time refreshing it. It's got a new interface. It's got new LLMs to play with, a better file upload, really great image generation, and a host of really awesome features. So if you haven't checked it out recently, plug for that. I just threw the link in chat, so go ahead and take a look. And with that, in our remaining, 18 minutes or thereabouts, I actually want to turn this presentation into a bit of a conversation. So I want to work on the first one, the first question first, which is how would you like to share how your group is using AI? So if you want to raise your hand virtually or just throw in chat, I'd love to turn this into a bit more of a conversation where you can share a little bit about what you're doing with AI in your space.
We just have to wait out the awkward silence, right?
Totally fair. Or are these tools not something that you've played with very much and are just here to listen and learn from other people? Oh, Hester, go ahead.
Thanks. Hey everybody, I'm Hester Breen. I work in alumni affairs and development, and this was just really fascinating because I did not know that there was an option for the API tool, so I've written that down, as well as billing code with an exclamation point. So I will be
That's the
investigating
important
that.
exclamation
Yeah,
point there.
exactly. But one of the ways my communications group is using AI right now is just to templatize a lot of our processes. So we're dropping our very, very dense process documents into AI and then asking it to come up with kind of like a short checklist of the kind of most necessary things to share out with our partners, and then also how we can close out on those projects and kind of debriefing and prepping, because a lot of our work is cyclical to be prepared for when this comes back next year. And we're also using it to help us with our data, just dumping it into the sandbox and saying like, hey, what's weird about this, or what's great about this, especially with analytics from our marketing space. So yeah. Thanks.
Oh, that's actually really interesting, Hester. You actually gave me an idea where after this I actually have to work on a bit of a like summarization of a multitude of documents. And you know, as much as I was also preparing for this presentation, for some reason I didn't connect the dot in my head just to be like, why don't I just upload this to the sandbox and get it to summarize for me, right? So thank you for that reminder. That's great that that you're starting to play with that. That's awesome.
And Hester Fritz very helpfully provided the Hewitt link to learn more about the API access. And Janelle posted in chat. So Janelle and her team are the service owners of the AI Sandbox. So a big thank you to them. And so Janelle's just saying that she uses it daily to do research and write emails.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Janelle, if you don't mind me picking on you a little bit, feel free to throw it in chat. You don't have to come off mute if you don't want to. But I'm curious, when you've done your research, how have you found your ability to make sure that you're getting the answers you expect back?
Yeah, I usually try to verify, at least like by looking at other sources on like Google. But yeah, I find that the AI Sandbox works pretty well. Like Sarah Weaver, she's the actual like main service owner for the AI Sandbox in our academic technology group. But yeah, it's been pretty good. V2 is doing great.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, Lawrence is seeking out extra. We're working on an upcoming event where we're talking about how to handle hallucinations. And so I can hear Lawrence looking for good content wherever we can find it.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Janelle, real quick, I know I highlighted a couple of new features with 2.0, but since you're the sandbox, is there any like one feature that you'd really just want the rest of the community here to know about?
I'd say that like the archiving is much better in V2. Like you can restore archives as well. Once something's deleted though, then it's gone forever. But if you archive it, you can always bring it back later if you need to. And then just the UI is really nice too. Yeah.
Yeah, love that. Well, thank you. You and your team have done an amazing work. I think the new interface is really slick, so really well done. Are there other stories out there that you would like to share? No? That's okay too. So the second question, we can always come back to the first if you remember a cool story or a use case that you'd like to share, by all means. But the second one is, is there any I didn't write that very well. Is there anything specific about AI that you'd like to learn more about? I'm sorry, it's late afternoon. My brain's not working as well as it should. I'll call myself out. But obviously, you know, events like these are super helpful for not only us, but also Justin and team to share wonderful information about AI and other utilities. So is there something you feel is missing? Is there something you feel you'd like to learn more about in a future episode, if you will? Or is it all just like super clear? Everything makes sense. Nothing's confusing about AI at all. I tease. It's changing
That's
so
exactly
often.
it. That's exactly it, Lawrence. We figured it all out.
Yeah. I know, for instance, one thing that we've done within HBS is we like to have a little segment of our presentations that like cater towards the news and like feature updates. So we included that this time as well to just be like, hey, what's new with the sandbox? What's new with ChatGPT? Was that something that you found helpful just to kind of get you up to speed on what's going on with these supported tools?
Maybe.
Yes, it was very
Ah.
helpful. I'll come off mute.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you.
It
Yeah.
was very helpful. One thing I have a question for, I'm just trying to see like if we can have like one of our like we have a post orders for all our security teams. Like it's
Mhm.
pretty bulky. The chatbot feature is really helpful, was like really an open eye for me where we can actually leverage chatbot for the team when they want to like research or reference a procedure or protocol for something. One question I have that I don't think you touched base on, once you create the chatbot, where do you save it?
Oh, that's a great question. I'll let Fritz answer that one.
Fritz
He
hopped
came
right
off
off.
mute. He was ready.
He's
was
ready
Happy
for
to
that
take
question.
that question. Yeah, so Melissa, let me just baseline a little bit. So you're talking about that custom GPT that we showed earlier that Ryan and Caitlin had been working on and where you're saving that. Just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, you create the chatbot, the custom GPT. It allows you to kind of filter all the questions. You kind of touch base on the OLF as an example, right? So the team can just research and be able to find that information easily.
so
But once it's created, where do we store that information? That was not
a really
clear to
good
me.
question. So when you're on chatgpt.com, you have this section called Explore GPTs. You can also access it via a button in the top right that says My GPTs. That's where all of that is stored, right? Almost think of these GPTs as your own files within your ChatGPT account. And all of those instructions, all of the things you've been working on, the configuration of that GPT, as well as the files that are uploaded to the GPT, are all stored in ChatGPT's platform at the end of the day, right? That's why this data security piece is very important to keep track of. You want to make sure that you're logged into your Harvard account that has that ChatGPT EDU if you're doing anything that's not level 1 data. But it is all stored in the ChatGPT platform, kind of inside of that GPT. And then from there, almost like a Google Doc or a Microsoft document, you can share that GPT with other members of your team, including the ability to share configuration settings with them, which will not necessarily let them go and retrieve those documents, but they can see which documents are uploaded and they can see the instructions that are given to the GPT if you choose to give them that level of access through a pretty familiar menu.
All right. So my team are contractors. Would they need to have access to ChatGPT in order for them to be able to interact with it?
Yeah, so unfortunately, ChatGPT,
I don't like
both
that
in
answer yet. So unfortunately.
No, that is one of the real limitations, right? For the data security piece of all of this, I can only speak for the HBS side, though I'm sure Dave Laporte, Matt Reeder would agree with me. They have it configured in the same way. The workspace is sort of this iron dome, and unless they have an account in the Harvard workspace, those
Which they
GPTs will
do.
not be shareable. Oh, they do?
Yes, they all do.
Well, then it's great
They're
news as
all
long as you're on the
onboarded.
workspace.
Okay. All right. Because I just shared that link that Lawrence sent with, and I sent it to one of the managers to see if they can actually open the sandbox. They couldn't.
Yes, so contractors, they're, and I'm not sure what the process is on the, Melissa, I don't know where you work, but I'm not sure what the process is on the Hewitt side, but contractors can get access to the AI sandbox. They need to do that via special request. And so I assume that's a special request via Hewitt. And there needs to be just a business need, a business justification around it.
That will be great. Thank you, Cara. I will be emailing you to get me that information, to get me that detail. Thank you.
Great.
Sure.
Thank you, Melissa. Nice to connect with you again. Been a little while.
Oh, sorry.
It sure has.
Sorry, I'm not paying attention to. I was like trying to respond to another chat. Sorry, Melissa. Yes, we can help you with that.
That's all good. Melissa and I used to work together in for
Oh,
security
how
operations,
exciting.
doing secure work. Anyway, I digress. Good to connect with you again.
Well, nice to meet you, Melissa. And yes, happy to connect on that. Megan Morrissey and I were going back and forth. She was looking for some more information on kind of how to help folks learn more about LLMs. And so
Well,
Megan, oh, go
I
Kara,
ahead.
think
happy to
Megan,
hop off chat too.
Yeah.
I'm curious less about teaching other people, but
Oh, got it.
more around like how are we teaching the LLM? So for the example
Got
that
it.
Fritz had showed and had said, you just give them this huge document and they know our language and our acronyms at our office.
Yeah.
So I'm with Hester in Alumni Affairs and Development. We don't have a ton of documentation for teams. So it's Hester, big props to you for putting that together and trying to get some stuff on paper. But seeing AI and knowing that we can talk to it and teach it, I think people are looking towards putting documentation together and just
Yeah.
wanting to learn what are the tips, what are certain ways that we can format that or, gray areas to avoid so we don't confuse how we're teaching the bot to respond
it.
to us.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, more about teaching and training the bot. Sorry, Megan, I was heading in a different
No,
direction on that.
that's okay. And to your point earlier too, like we could go all those directions as well. It was
Yeah, so much potential, right? I don't know that we have time in the next 5 minutes.
I
As
can give some quick bullet points that
yeah,
might help.
perfect,
I mean,
Ryan.
it is a very loaded topic for sure, but I think if you go about it in a pretty systematic way, and you would almost make an outline kind of like you are teaching a person and creating a lesson plan or something like that if you're putting a class together of what are the key bullet points of the data that you're uploading. So in my example, it was very Excel based. And I think what you were describing there is going to be more of a like document, Word, PDF type of thing that you'd be uploading, which is going to be heavier text. But you want to kind of figure out what all the sources are. Is it one file, multiple files? Does that file have sections within it? And what are the things within those sections that you need the tool to know? So with Fritz's example, where he's talking about, oh, I need to let it know what an OLF is. You could do the same thing of have one of your bullets be figure out what are the key acronyms it might need to know that are repeated through there, and what are the context clues that it might need for those. What are the roles involved? What are the departments involved? And then see if there's anything missing from that documentation that you might need to add in. So knowing the data you're uploading is going to be the biggest thing. And then, creating a rough outline like that so you can really just kind of work through the process of it. Rather than do what I did in the hackathon environment where it's, a lot of guess and check of, all right, upload a file, ask it a question, and like, oh, why did it tell me that? And you go back and try to train around it. I think if you can plan ahead a little bit more, you can get a much better result the first time through.
That's awesome. Thank you. And it's a good reminder too to start with something and test it out and
Yeah.
then see what I need to add. What is
keep
it not
building.
understanding? Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
And Megan, the only thing I would add to that is we do have a fair number of folks in HBS IT who have who've got some good experience in all of this now. So it would, if it's helpful, please do reach out and we can connect you probably with the same folks in our learning design and training services team. And because they've been doing a lot of work with custom GPT development. And I'm sure they'd be happy to share.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will follow up.
Sure.
Yeah. And the last really quick hit is if you are uploading Excel, make sure to name your columns and give them really clear headings so that when you tell it, hey, this column is people's names and this column is, you know, a salary number or whatever it is, having them described will help train the model as to what it's actually looking at. So key column headings are important. But yes, thank you all
We're
for
getting
coming.
close to time. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
getting close to time. We've got a couple more
Let's
minutes,
wrap up.
but I just wanted to get this slide up there. The easiest way, so you don't have to figure out our email addresses, the easiest way to ask these follow-up questions or reach out is at this AIalliance@HBS email address. But we do have a couple more minutes, so and I gave Lawrence the hook there prematurely. So if you have any other questions or Lawrence, anything else you want to add?
No, by all means. Justin, did you want to say any parting words?
A huge thank you to you and your team. This has been amazing, and we really appreciated having you. This is an awesome presentation, so thank you so much. And one last thing too, I did post a link in the chat for our next upcoming AI Tech Talk as well. Please come to that. We'll be having guests from other universities join us for a panel. Really looking forward to that one as well. But yes, thank you so much again to HBS IT.
That's cool.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
Justin, I'll share the slide deck with you. That's probably, does that make the most sense?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thanks,
Thank you all,
everyone.
and
Have a
thank you,
great
Justin.
afternoon. Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.